And I got down to like 110 pounds. And I was so thin, and I'm begging the doctors to tell me what's wrong. I'm on waiting lists because it's socialized medicine. And the doctor one day was like, I think I figured out what was wrong. I'm like, oh, good, please. What is it? And he's like, you're bulimic. I'm like, you are a moron. But like, even just to like drink a cup of coffee, I'm like, oh, that hurt really bad. Or blow drying my hair. Like, it just was exhausting. And I have POTS too. So I would get dizzy and lightheaded and nauseous. And yeah, I pretty much all my POTS and yeah, all my stuff's just in remission. I'm off all my meds. I had a comment that was like, I see a cow and I think, wow, what a beautiful creature. And Cameron just thinks, murder it and give it to me on a plate. I feel like I've been given like 10 years back of my life. I felt like I was living like a grandma, and now I'm living like a normal mom, and I'm grateful for it.
We've got another special guest today. We've got Cameron with us. Cameron, how are you today? Where are you at, by the way, if you don't mind sharing?
I am in Steubenville, Ohio, so outside of Pittsburgh.
Okay. I've been to Ohio, just I think Cleveland once was the only time I've been there. But tell me, I guess, a little bit about your background. What do you do for a living?
So I am very busy homeschooling 4 children, and I run a podcast on the side. I have a podcast for ladies. It's called Among the Lilies. So ladies that are tired of pretending and are ready to be real. And I joke that between me and 4 other ladies that I employ, we have a full-time job because we're all busy moms and busy wives. So yeah. And I travel around and give talks and things like that with my husband.
So you said 4 kids, right? Yeah, that's what I got. 4 kids. That's a lot of work. It is. It's definitely a very important job for sure. And so what got you interested in podcasting and giving talks and things like that?
Yeah. So my husband and I met doing missionary work in Ireland. We traveled around the country doing retreats for high school and secondary school students. So our faith was very important to us back then. And then just over the years, we did youth ministry and things. My husband runs a podcast called Pints with Aquinas, and people joke that he's like the Catholic, he's the Catholic Rogan in the Catholic world, Joe Rogan in the Catholic world, because he does these long 3-hour interviews. And yeah, so he was doing podcasting. I was busy having babies, and then I had my 4th, and I had all C-sections. And then my 4th was a preemie and was crazy sick and kept almost dying. And then once he started getting better, I fell apart and had postpartum really bad. And I tried to find a good Christian-based woman's podcast, and they were horrible. They were really fake. And like, it's okay if you're not a good wife. I didn't sweep the floor today. And it made me angry. And I felt like the Lord telling me I had the gift of gab and I could go record and do something about it. So I decided to vent over a microphone and interview friends and other amazing, beautiful women, and just talking about the struggles of motherhood in real life, and mental illness and other things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've seen obviously sort of a significant rise of what secularism. Many people have stepped away from religion as a for whatever purposes, and they try to fill it with these other things, whether it's video games or politics or various religious-like alternatives in a way. And so it's for better or worse. Many people would argue it's for worse. I'm sure you would as well, but interesting. So you were doing, you said, was it in Ireland you said you were at doing missionary work? I think you said.
Yeah. So my husband's Australian and I'm American, obviously. And we met in Ireland traveling around. Yeah. And then we got married, lived in Ireland, had our first 2 kids there. I had emergency C-sections with my first. And then we lived in Canada, California. We've lived all over. Yeah, been all over the place. But I have always had health issues, and I don't know how people that don't have faith, like, live with them. Like, it's hard enough when I'm praying and like relying on Christ and asking for the grace to offer up what I'm going through. I don't think I could do it if I didn't have my faith.
That's interesting. As a surgeon, I've taken care of a lot of patients, and some were practicing of different religions and some weren't. And if you look at the literature, there's clear evidence that having a faith and a belief and even a positive outlook is beneficial towards healing process. So there's definitely something there, even objectively in the literature. So there's a real effect there. And whether it's divine intervention or something else, but it certainly seems to appear. So that's quite interesting. So when you say you went through this postpartum depression, which a lot of women suffer with, and many of them suffer in silence, and it can be, some of them go on to commit suicide. It can be very devastating for obviously the whole family when that occurs. But how did you, I don't know how long ago that was for you, but how did you deal with it then? And would you have changed anything today?
Yeah. So my youngest is 8 years old. So it was, 9 years ago. And I think for me, I had a C-section. I just kept going, and I tend to go to overdoer mode. Like, I've got this. I will figure it out. Like, my personality is more choleric and more of someone that's like, I got this. So I was pumping and doing a feeding tube. And I think I honestly don't think I slept for, 6 months, maybe 8 months. Like, I'd have a little nap, an hour here, an hour there, but I was trying to keep this baby alive. And I had 3 other kids that I was homeschooling and just trying to juggle all the things. And I think something just broke. Yeah, I ate healthy. I exercised. I used to teach workout classes. I had GI issues, but I had a pretty good diet and exercise. Yeah, but I just hit my limit and broke.
How old were your other kids at the time?
My oldest was 7.
Okay.
So I had a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn. So
not a lot of help. They can do a few things. They can get you something. Go get this for mommy, but you can't really say, here, take the kid for a while. Yeah. So that's tough. Gosh, that really is. And that's my kids, 17, 15, 13, 11 right now. They're all 2 years apart. So it's very evenly spaced, not dissimilar to what you are. So you got through that, I guess, through the grace of God, I guess you could say, and hopefully doing the right things. And sometimes God gives us the tools to figure some of this stuff out. It's like, hey, look, I gave you, there's that old joke about what I gave you all this stuff. Why don't you figure it out? Those things they provide for you. Obviously, I spent a lot of time talking about nutrition, specifically animal-based, meat-based diets, carnivore diets, and stuff like that. Does any of that stuff impact you in any way? Do you talk about nutrition very much, or what are your thoughts?
Nutrition's always been important to me. So I was a athlete in high school. I did soccer, softball, basketball, track. I was captain of the wrestling team. And so sports were rather important to me. And I was very fit, and I went from that lifestyle and eating at home. So I lived at home, and my mom was just your typical American mom. We always had meat, potatoes, veg, and salad. And then I did missionary work in Canada, traveling around, and my diet switched to frozen lasagnas and pizzas. And I started not holding down food. Randomly, I'd vomit. It would be weird. It would be like once a month in the beginning. And then it turned into like almost every time I ate. And the doctors in Canada gave me medicine and like, oh, you probably have an ulcer. They were trying to figure out what was wrong. And nothing was working. And I'm tall. I'm 5'8.5". I got down. So my weight should be right around 128. That's what I wrestled. So that's an ideal weight for me. And I got down to 110 pounds, and I was so thin, and I'm begging the doctors to tell me what's wrong. I'm on waiting lists because it's socialized medicine. And the doctor one day was like, I think I figured out what was wrong. I'm like, oh, good. Please. What is it? And he's like, you're bulimic. I'm like, you are a moron. I've been begging you to figure out what's wrong with me. So I flew home to the States. I had 1 million tests done, and I was diagnosed with GERD, Barrett's esophagus, esophagitis. And the doctor that did my upper GI said I had the esophagus of a 50-year-old man that was overweight and smoked and drank all of his life. I was like, thanks so much. I was 19 at the time. I was told that I'd have esophageal cancer by the time I turned 30. And I was put on very strong medication and told that I had to cut out all fats from my diet. And I had to limit what I was eating. So I went very veg heavy. So I feel like so processed food and I never got along. I never was someone that could go eat at McDonald's. I'd instantly vomit. So that wasn't a thing. So I had a pretty healthy diet and lifestyle. And then I moved to Ireland, and my doctor refused to give me my meds. And I was pregnant, and I was like, you don't understand. I have really bad heartburn. I'll get sick. He's like, oh no, you get very sick in America. You'll be grand here. And I was like, I'm getting heartburn. So when I was pregnant, I was getting heartburn. I was talking to him about it. He's like, oh, I got a wee little present for you. And he gave me a bottle of apple cider vinegar. And he said, take a shot a day. You'll be grand. And sure enough, I never went back. I never got back on my meds. I was pretty healthy for a few years. And then when I moved back to North America, I moved back to Canada, my GI issues started acting up again. So I'd battled with it on and off for multiple years, but normally trying to treat it through diet.
Yeah, it's interesting. An interesting anecdote there with the Irish accent and everything. But I think his probably perception is probably pretty accurate, and that the quality of the food is so problematic in the U.S. relative to even Europe, which still has some issues with their food. That it's that. And you mentioned I wasn't eating a lot of processed food, but a lot of the fermentable food. You think about food that we ferment leads to pressure and gas, and that can go backwards upstream. And so that's where we get a lot of this reflux from. So I think that's what the physiology is doing there. And so it cleared it up, just the apple cider vinegar and not eating the American food. And then you've come back here. You mentioned wrestling. Where did you grow up again? Or you like Iowa or something like that? Or
I was
Texas.
So yeah, it was the first year. So it was in 2000. It was the first year that they had a girls wrestling team. And so our wrestling coach was smart, and he just went out to all the sports and recruited the most aggressive players. And so he asked me, and I was like, I don't know how to wrestle. He's like, no, but I see you on the field. Like, you're taking down the other girls. Like, I'll teach you how to wrestle. And so our very first match, one girl after another got pinned. And we normally go like in weight order, but the other girl, my weight, didn't have a singlet. So I ended up going last. So the guys were like, Coach, this is a joke. This is a joke. And then it was my turn. I was the last girl up, and I threw the girl out of the ring. I just threw her. And then I ended up pinning her. It was horrible. It was the worst pin ever, but I basically just held her down and I didn't even have a good hold, but I managed to just strengthen her and pin her. And so everybody was cheering, and the coach was like, that's great. Horrible form. Horrible. I need to teach you more. But yeah, so we had a lot of fun.
You had the mentality. Yeah, I have since I started doing jiu-jitsu recently, I have a lot of appreciation for wrestling and because we do a lot of wrestling in that as well. It's a difficult sport. It's challenging. It's a tough sport for sure. So now you said you've got, I guess you said the lilies or something like the 4 lilies or something like that. So you've got
Among the Lilies.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, you're fine.
So
fine.
Obviously you're talking about how, I don't know, life is as a woman, as someone of faith, I would imagine. What are the major things you discuss, or what are the things you find that are problematic in society that we have problems with?
Yeah, I've talked about all sorts of things. So the main thing is being real life you and not Instagram version of you. So I just talk to people about being real, and then I share about my life. So I had a miscarriage and I went septic 6 years ago. So I found myself in the ICU, pretty much dying. And I was in the ICU for 10 days. And then when I came out, I couldn't walk. And I was very neurologically damaged. So like my left side of my body would shake and convulse and do all sorts of weird stuff. And I remember the neurologist in my room, and he was just sitting and chatting with me. I'm like, do you think I'm crazy? Do you think it's in my head? He's like, no. He's like, we just can't figure out what it was. I was always the mystery patient. Like, I'm very autoimmune. And so I never ran a fever. So I had a miscarriage, D&C, and then I felt horrible. I was very sick. I got to the point where I couldn't turn my neck. I had a birthday party for my daughter, and a couple of my friends ganged up on me, and they're like, you need to go to the hospital now. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I got this. And I couldn't turn my neck, and I was in excruciating pain. And they did an internal ultrasound. I was vomiting through it. I was in so much pain, but I didn't run a fever. So they said I was fine. And then the next day it turned into a migraine, and I was just, I couldn't function at all. And we had a good pediatrician friend and told my husband to get me to the doctor that did the D&C, and he admitted me. And then my white blood cells started dying off. My blood pressure plummeted. And then I was in the hospital for about a month, and I lived on IV Myers cocktails and vitamins, minerals, and I ate so clean. And I was someone that would react to things badly. And so I just shared my journey, shared my story about that. I had C-sections, so I talk about that. And I don't know, giving yourself a break and not stressing out, but like, you're a strong girl. You got this. Like, keep going, keep persevering. And even though something's hard, it's worth it. And I've dealt with the last probably 5 or 6 years, a lot of chronic pain, chronic migraines, mast cell activation. So I break out in hives head to toe, and just, all sorts of stuff. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So when I wrestled, I didn't know this then, but that's why I stopped wrestling, was because in regionals. So I would have placed for state, but I dislocated my shoulders 6 times. And on the 6th time, I couldn't pop it back in. And so, yeah, just all sorts of health issues.
Yeah. So how does meat play a role in your podcast, or do you? I know you had some health issues, and I think carnivores helped them, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, they have, like, a lot. And I've talked about it recently. I've talked about it on my show and then also on my husband's. And so I don't know why carnivore is working. You're the doctor, so maybe you can tell me more why it's working. And what's crazy is I didn't have a standard American diet. I had a pretty healthy diet. I removed fruits, nuts, seeds, and rice. And vegetables. That's it. And I had already been playing. I went lectin free and nightshade free probably 3 years ago. And I can't do sugar at all. So that's been cut out. Last time I did carnivore, I was in Guatemala for a month, and I don't think the meat was the best quality. So I was relying heavily on eggs and seafood. And I felt a bit better, but not this much better. And this time, I don't know why. I've been doing it for 4 months. I don't know if I wasn't fat adapted last time, and this time I am. But this time, like, I feel great. This is the best I felt in a while. I started losing weight and I was concerned. And my doctor's like, it's not that much weight. Let's wait and see. And I'm actually like, I've regained cartilage and muscle, and I'm feeling good and strong. Like, I'm drinking my butter latte right now. And yeah, I feel like I'm just in like a whole new season. Like, I was just at a conference with 30,000 students, and it was massive. And last year I spoke at it, and I literally was clung to the podium and could barely move, and then had to sit down to like take the people. And this year I was jumping all over stage, running around this conference center, and I was fine. And I felt great. And I just made sure that I found a steakhouse, and I would go get a steak once a day. Ribeye is my go-to. I love the fat. I don't know why, but my body craves it. And yeah, I was on a low fat diet for a long time. And now I'm like, oh, I wish I had not listened to my doctors, just done all this back then. And I'm more strict. Like, I would love to have like the whole carnivore diet. I'm more beef, broth, butter, and eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's World Carnivore Month, if you don't know that right now. And what I do during this month is I just do beef, salt, and water, and that's pretty much it. And throughout the year, I might add some eggs in there, and there'll be a few little dairy products. But generally, I've been doing this now. It's my 8th year doing this. Interesting, because you mentioned Ehlers-Danlos, which is a connective tissue disorder. And I've seen people with Ehlers-Danlos disorder syndrome get dramatically better on carnivore. They go from joints that are subluxing and dislocating to no longer doing so. So it's interesting. I don't know what your experience has been so far with that. Has it impacted that any?
Absolutely. Every step, my hips would dislocate, and my knees too, and my ankles. So I wear insoles. But I got to the point where my rheumatologist was I'm like, you've got to give me some more something I can do to get better. And he's like, this is just your new normal. I was given a handicap pass, and I just wasn't okay with that. I've been seeing a really good chiropractor in Orlando, and he's helped me a lot, but I still, like, he could put me back together, but I'd fall apart at 6 weeks every time. My body would just fall apart. Everything would be popping in and out, excruciatingly painful. Like, even just to like drink a cup of coffee, I'm like, oh, that hurt really bad. Or blow drying my hair. Like, it just was exhausting. And I have POTS too. So I would get dizzy and lightheaded and nauseous. And yeah, I pretty much all my POTS and yeah, all my stuff's just in remission. I'm off all my meds. I'm doing great. I feel like my GI stuff, like I have IBS and other issues too. I feel like my GI, for the most part, is doing a lot better. Like, I feel like it's like on vacation, but I feel like that's the only area that I'm like, okay, it would be nice maybe if I was a little more. I know a lot of carnivores say like their GI, it's just very smooth and everything's easy. I feel like I still have a little bit of flare up with that, but all my joints and everything is, amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting that a lot of people say all disease begins in the gut. And I think there's a lot of insight and truth to that in a way. And so, like, maybe not perfect, maybe it's improving. And I've seen a number of people now that I remember the first time, this is 5 years ago, somebody told me that their Ehlers-Danlos went away. And I was like, that makes no sense to me, because it's it's literally a genetic connective tissue disorder. And I'm like, why would a diet impact it? But strangely enough, it does. And this woman who was 57 at the time was an ER physician. And she told me she woke up every day with like 3 or 4 joints dislocated, and she would have to put them back in to start her day. And she'd go to her ER shift, and half the time her shoulder would fall out of place, and she'd have to go and put it back in. And she went carnivore, and within a month, nothing was dislocating, and it hasn't for years now. And it's really an interesting thing. And I don't know the mechanism by which it works. I wish I do because it's such a weird one to me. And she also had POTS. So POTS seems to run fairly commonly.
Yeah, they go together often.
With EDS, yeah. But so that's really cool. That's really interesting. And so among your lilies, your lily friends, did any of them, do they think you're crazy or anything? Or what are their thoughts on you doing this sort of crazy all meat diet? Because that's not the normal thing that women like to talk about or do. They're usually salads. And
they're really, they're really supportive, and they've been wonderful. They're just happy. They've seen me through a lot and especially, so my body really fell apart. We moved to Steubenville 3 years ago, and I used to have like flare-ups where I would get really sick. So like once a month, I like wouldn't be functioning. My kids would get a cold. I'd end up in hospital. And then when we moved here 3 years ago, I ended up in the hospital 3 different times for a week each within the first 2 months of living here. And doctors like just couldn't figure it out. Cleveland Clinic did the best. They were the ones that like figured out more of what was wrong with me and what was going on. But yeah, and I've shared with them like, and they've seen me go through it, and yeah, they're shocked and they're happy. And some of them are also trying it. And they're like, if you could do this, Cameron. And I'm the sugar addicted queen. Like I love my sugar. And I used to eat so much of it. And I was always eating. So it's odd for me now not to eat I think I eat more than your average carnivore, which I'm a smaller built person. So I don't think that necessarily makes sense, but I have a high metabolism. So maybe I'm not worried about it. I don't care I'm not weighing myself or anything. I'm eating what my body's craving. But some days, like I'll pack away half a dozen eggs and a stick and a half of butter and 2 ribeyes and a little bit of ground beef.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Focusing on sort of religion, Catholicism, and some of the scripture and stuff like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. I've read the Bible before cover to cover, and I can't remember it telling me to go on a low-fat diet. I just don't remember seeing that in there. No. What is the sort of the contextual thought about diet when it comes to religion and diet? What are your thoughts on that?
I've joked before that I need to be more kosher. Like pig just doesn't get along with me. I now can have certain bacon, which is really nice, but pork in general doesn't agree with me. And that's more Old Testament that we don't eat that. But yeah, like we are all about feasting. We are all about celebrating. And yeah, we're pro meat, but also pro vegetables, pro wine, fermented grapes, which I guess carnivores, we don't have wine. Or maybe you do. I don't know if you do. I haven't had alcohol in probably like 4 or 5 months. And I missed it a lot in the beginning. And I had to be careful with like my alcohol. Like I always have to make sure so I would get like organic, sulfur free, but I haven't even been doing that lately. And I feel great. Like I think scripture is very like, it was loaves and fishes that Jesus multiplied. So I don't think he's anti-bread, but I think real bread from back in the day, like I make sourdough bread for my kids. And that's real bread. And fish are real food. And yeah, no, I don't think it clashes with our faith at all.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't vegan. I can tell you that. And they're always talking about fattening the fattened calf and fattening things up for slaughter, because that's quite honestly how we're for me. Because you mentioned you like the ribeye and you like the fat, and it's essentially because when you're on a carnivore, that's where your energy is. You're not getting energy from anywhere else. You might convert a little bit of protein, but it's mostly the fats you consume is. Particularly if you're fairly lean already, then you're like, wow, I need some energy. And so that's why I think it's generally appealing to people. Particularly, I like it crisped up, a little salt on there, and it's like, wow, that's such a wonderful treat there. How has is your husband on board with this, or what does he think? Does he think this is nutty, or what are your thoughts on that?
My husband started something this month called the Dumb Ox Challenge. And so Thomas Aquinas is known as the Dumb Ox. That's like his nickname. So basically my husband's taken on carnivore this month, plus whiskey and 100 push-ups a day and like a little morning and evening prayer. And so he's been doing it for the month of January, and he's feeling really good. And he's, looking really buff. His arms. My husband went to Australia for 2 weeks when I had been doing carnivore for about 2 months, and he went away for 2 weeks. And that's when he thinks everything changed. So he came back, like even just laying in bed, he put his hand like on my thigh and be like, oh my goodness, Cameron, feel your legs. They're muscular again. Like my legs used to always be like solid muscle. And I've been pretty frail, skinny bones that like I've had a lot of moments. Like my husband was talking about one time we were traveling, we were in the airport and he was pushing me in the wheelchair and he was looking at the top of my head and he's like, Cameron, I think your hair is falling out. And I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like I just was so sick and I was skin and bones and he's pushing me in the wheelchair and just like, we were in our mid to late 30s. Like, this isn't how life's supposed to be. And so he's loving it. He is a big supporter. He tells me all the time, he's like, do not eat anything ever again. Like, stick carnivore. He's a big fan, and he's happy that I'm doing it.
Well, that's good when you have a supportive environment. That's one of the things that I see a lot of people, and they're not in a supportive environment. It's tough because they're ridiculed, and people are just here, have some cake, and you don't be crazy, that type of stuff. And it's really hard for that because, and it's interesting because women in particular seem to have this pressure to eat low fat and be very thin and eat salads and with the dressing on the side and maybe a little skinny piece of chicken on there. And to go out there and to start gorging on big fatty ribeyes, it's got to be like, I don't know if it, do you, when you go to like events and gatherings and eat like that, do people comment that this is bizarre? Or what are the...
So Matt and I were in a restaurant and we got a bone-in ribeye, and I was just like gnawing on the bone. Like, it's my favorite. Like, I'm sucking the fat out. And he's like, I'm sure people were looking and like, oh my goodness, this crazy woman loves this bone. But yeah, I like my wedding day, like the caterers, she's like, I asked for seconds, and she's like, no bride asks for seconds. Like, so I always liked eating food. I never was afraid of food. I wasn't afraid of, I think because I was active, like I was like, okay, well, eat whatever you want. And then you just lose the weight after. Or even in pregnancies, I gained a lot of weight, but then I'd lose it afterwards. Like, I think I am blessed with like a good metabolism, and I am more active. So I was a slave to the scale when I wrestled, because all wrestlers are. And I have chosen since then, I've never owned a scale, and I don't want to have one. And I'm like, I'll know when my body's doing well by the way my clothes fit and how I feel. And if I feel like I'm getting a little too big, then I will exercise more. So things like that. But the last couple of years, it was honestly, my fear was that I couldn't put on weight, and carnivores helped me do that in a very healthy way. Like, I'm not too big or anything. I feel like I'm my ideal, weight now.
Yeah, a lot of people comment they seem like it's easier for them to put on some muscle. I think it's just the higher quality protein that you're getting. But let me ask, because you mentioned at one point you struggled with postpartum depression, and how have you had a chance to notice a change in either mood or cognition since switching over to that? Has that made a difference in that aspect?
So yes, but I'm also not constantly in pain. So I've been chronically, constantly in pain for years, and I go south and I'll feel better when I'm in the south. So I go to Florida a lot, or as I said, I went to Guatemala for like a month or 2 months. And like here, I couldn't walk 3 doors down. My son wanted me to watch him ride his bike. He was like 6 years old, and I could stand in the front yard and I could make it maybe 3 doors down. And every step, it was excruciatingly painful. And I had special compression pants to hold my joints in, and I'd be holding my hips, just taking a couple steps. And then we'd be in Guatemala hiking a volcano. So like I would have like remission times, but for the most part, I had way more bad days than good days. And I always felt better on good days. But yeah, no, mentally, I feel great. I do think that the Lord has given me the grace to offer it up. So as Catholics, we're really blessed that we don't think suffering's pointless. We believe that it's redemptive. Our Lord and Savior, Jesus, loved us so much that he died on a cross for love of us. He didn't want to do it. Like, we look at the Garden in Gethsemane, and he begged, like, Lord, like, he was so stressed out. Like, talk about anxiety and stress. He sweat blood. What's that called? You probably know what that's called.
Oh, I can't remember the technical term, but yeah, there is a term for it. I'm blanking right now.
Yeah. But he said, Father, like, if this cup could pass by me, let it. But if it can't, not my will, but your will be done. And so I feel like with all my pain and all my sickness, that's been my prayer. I'm like, I don't want it, but let me offer it up. Like, let me praise God in it and use it as a prayer, praying for others. And so I feel like most of the time I was able to stay on top of, because I fill out all these forms, and every doctor was like, you should be depressed. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not. And they're like, but you should be. Like, you should have a lot of anxiety. And I'm like, I don't. Like, I have had times of depression and times of anxiety, but it hasn't crippled me, or like, I don't think I was suffering from it, but I do feel like a freedom and a lightness since I've been doing carnivore, and I'm so grateful for it.
You'd mentioned you're seeing a rheumatologist. Was that for the Ehlers-Danlos, or what were you seeing the rheumatologist for?
Yeah.
And you said you're off a bunch of, what medications were you on? You said you're off all your meds. So what were you on?
So I was on medication to keep my blood pressure up. my blood pressure kept bottoming out. And so I was on something to keep it up. I was on pain meds. The only pain meds that worked for me was gabapentin. And so they prescribed me, I got up to 900 milligrams every morning and every night. And I was on a lot of different supplements. So Cleveland Clinic, I was also part of the functional medicine, which I was grateful for. I had chronic Lyme disease. I had a whole slew of other issues. So I was on different things for that. Yeah, my prescription list was probably this long. I was on medication for my IBS and yeah, all sorts of stuff. But I've been trying to get myself off it over the years. And yeah, like the gabapentin in particular, I didn't like the side effects. I didn't like the way it made me feel. Yeah, I found quercetin. Is that what it is? So I was on things because I was overreacting to everything else. And so I had to take like Benadryl at night and I was on some other prescription so my body wouldn't overreact. And then I found like quercetin that kept things at bay. I was on low dose naltrexone that also, I had endometriosis, stage 4 endometriosis and PCOS and tons of female health issues too.
Goodness,
so,
that was quite a bit to deal with. Yeah, and I've a lot of people talk about Neurontin or gabapentin being very like sedating and feel like they're a zombie when they're on that stuff. I've seen people talk about that. So, well, good that you're able to get off of those medications. Not to mention you're paying for them. You're depending upon someone prescribing them to you, and so it's more. I find it to be somewhat empowering to have some sort of more control over your fate a little bit. I know you can put your faith in God, but at the same point, he also gave you a brain and a body and resources to figure some of this stuff out yourself. And so I feel a lot of people feel like they're disempowered when they get stuck in the medical system and they feel like it's hopeless in a way. I know I know on your social media, your YouTube channel and whatnot, you've talked about this journey. How has that been received with regard to the fact that you went carnivore? Were people saying, no, you need to go plant-based or how poor animals or something like that? What has that been like?
Yeah. I had a comment that was like, I see a cow and I think, wow, what a beautiful creature. And Cameron just thinks, murder it and give it to me on a plate. And I was like, no, I'm going to let the cow graze and eat the grass first and then spread its lovely fertilizer all over. And then you can grill it and serve it to me on a plate. Most of my followers are great. It was random people, but I got a lot of hateful stuff. And I just started writing back and I was like, you know what? I really feel called. It's not even health. I feel called to be carnivore just to offset all the vegans. I feel like we need a little more balance.
I don't know if it may be just coincidence, but it does seem that a lot of vegans often are either agnostic or atheist as well, which is an interesting observation. I don't know what the correlation, but I think that's a fairly high correlation.
I think it's you're taking everything into your own hands and you're making food and the earth, you're God.
Yeah, perhaps that's part of it or something. So it's an interesting sort of dichotomy.
But they have really weird blind spots with it too. Like you can't just keep growing vegetables in the same, where are you getting your fertilizer from? If we're anti-animal.
Yeah, they don't want to, those questions, they don't want to discuss those questions. It seems to be they've got this. Food comes from the grocery store, and that's the end of the discussion. So, or it comes from we're going to grow it in some hydroponic factory or something like that. But it's interesting. Has there been any downsides to this diet? Because I always like to ask people to ask about the downside. Because sometimes there are some downsides. Anything you've noticed?
I honestly miss salads. I make my own dressing from scratch and I love adding extra ginger to it or garlic to it and it just has a nice kick and I miss that. I miss having wine and cheese with my husband in the evening and yeah.
When you say you miss salads, you actually miss the leaf part or you miss the stuff you put on top of it? Because that's what I always found. I didn't really like the leaves. I liked the stuff I was putting on top.
Yeah. I covered mine in nuts and seeds and I loved it. I had this RX almond butter that I loved. It tastes like cookie dough from someone that's been gluten-free for 10 years. I thought it tasted like cookie dough. I miss having that with my cup of coffee and yeah. Oh, I would love to know your thoughts on coffee. So today's my first day not having any coffee. I feel like I cut down on coffee, but someone told me with my GI stuff, they said I'd see a big difference if I cut it out. What do you suggest? So right now I have butter. I browned butter and then put it in the freezer.
Butter bites. A lot of people like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I pureed that in hot water and then I just sprinkled the top with this LMNT, but this has stevia in it. So I don't like using it. But so that's I don't know, a cheap drink. I like drinking tea and coffee all the time. Do you have
The observations on that are that, and like I said, I think you said you're 4 months into this, so that's a good time to experiment. When people are first transitioning to carnivore, I tell them if they're drinking coffee, just leave it alone because it's too stressful to drop coffee and carbohydrates and fiber because you're asking your body to maybe adapt too much. But then when you get to where you're at a point where you're like, okay, I'm in the groove now, that's a good time to experiment with dropping caffeine or coffee or tea. And what I find is that about half the people, when they give up coffee, they notice a decent improvement. The other half don't, though. So it's like one of those things where if you notice no difference, and you enjoy it, then go back and do it.
I know. I'm the canary. I'm totally the canary in the coal mine. So I'm like, I'm going to be in that half of people. Or they're like, only 1%. I'm like, I'll be that one.
Well, it's 50-50. I think it's about 50-50 from what I've observed. So yes, there's physiologic reasons why giving up coffee might make sense for some people. Full transparency, I never drank coffee. I just never liked it. So I never really got into the habit. I like to smell it. I like the smell of it. And I see people, I just see so many people where they get to where they can't function without that first cup of coffee in the morning. And they're like, don't talk to me. I'll have my coffee or something like that. And I'm like, wow, that doesn't sound very good.
No, but, like you're totally enslaved to it.
Yeah, it is. And it's like you're constantly, it's constantly a withdrawal cycle because you drink coffee throughout the day and then you abstain to it for a while until you start like feeling, I got to have my coffee. And it's almost like you're constantly in withdrawal from that stuff. So yeah, it might be beneficial. It can help. You mentioned you still had a little bit of residual gut stuff. So it could be the last little bit of thing that's causing some gut issues for you. And
I've cut it down to like 2 or 3 cups a week. And so I feel like I'm doing better, but I'm going to try to keep cutting it down.
You seem like you're pretty animated and happy and in good mood. So you seem to be doing pretty well with that because there's other people that'd be like, their coffee. So good for you. Let's see what else I want to ask about. Are you, as far as, I guess you said you're speaking in front of large audiences. Are you planning on talking about diet in a form or fashion of this? Because this is because I'm so used to talking to people in low carb groups, and every once in a while I get on a platform where what I'm saying is novel information. So it'd be interesting because I'm so used to I'll go present at a conference and I ask people to raise their hand if they're carnivore, and 70% of people put their hand up. I'm like, well, I'm done. I don't need there's nobody I need to talk to at this point. But when you get to a completely new audience that's never even heard the word carnivore, that's interesting because it's really, you get a lot of questions and obviously a lot of skeptics and a lot of people just think it's outright crazy. Is there any plan on evangelizing carnivorism?
I'd be open to it. I feel like I'm still a newbie and I'm still learning from people like you and Dr. Anthony Shafee and Kelly Hogan and Michaela Peterson. So I feel like I'm still learning. And so I gave a talk just recently. We were at a conference in St. Louis. It was, I think, 20 or 30,000 college students from all over. And one of my talks was on suffering. And so that talk, I talked about all my health stuff and shared my health journey and giving them advice on it. And the main thing is not taking your identity in the diagnosis. Like, I am not EDS. I am not POTS. I am Cameron Fradd, a daughter of God. And that's who I am. I may have these other symptoms and these other things, and you can stack them all up. So I could see one day eventually getting into, I do talk about diet, and I do think diet's really important. But I think the majority of the people just need to get off all the processed crap. Yeah. And I think they would see a huge improvement just getting off the processed junk. I don't know that I think everyone should do carnivore. I'm still not sure. For me, it's amazing and I feel so great. My husband can eat like a lot of different things and he doesn't feel horrible. I don't know that it's optimal, but so I'd be open to it, but I'm not, it's still out there. I feel like I'm still early learning, days of it.
And I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think getting rid of the processed stuff is probably going to have the most impact on the most people. And certainly not everybody needs to do carnivore. For those that want to do it, and I think there are some people that would ideally be suited for doing that. I think that's important. Even our company, which is Revero, where we're licensed in all 50 states, and we take people in and try to get them off meds and stuff like that. Not every one of those patients will end up on carnivore. Some will, but not all. So it is an important thing. And I think it helps with, you'd mentioned you're like a sugar person, like sugar addict. And again, the Bible does not mention sugar once. There's a little honey in there. Sugar wasn't invented yet. Cane sugar was like 1600s or something like that. We started seriously cultivating that stuff. How do you feel with regard to those cravings and stuff like that? Because a lot of people are surprised that they don't have the cravings when they think I could never give up bread, or I could never give up fill in the blank cupcakes or something like that. But how do you feel about that stuff now?
So what I find interesting, and this is the thing I'm still trying to figure out. So I've been doing trace minerals and I'm trying to find a good, and I do salt sticks. I'm trying to find a good, so some people can do electrolytes and they're totally fine. I will, when I sprinkle a little bit of this on a drink, or I put, it has, like, it's clean, but it has stevia, and I will crave sugar when I have this. And sometimes, so like for Christmas and Thanksgiving, I gave myself a keto cup. Those Evolve keto cups. Do you know what they are? It's like dark chocolate and coconut fat. Okay. It's like a keto thing. Okay. Anyhow, it's pretty clean ingredients, but it does have, I think it's monk fruit sweetener in it. And so I gave myself one keto cup. I gave myself a glass of something with this LMNT, and I had 3 blueberries, and they were amazing and delicious, and I loved them. But the few days after, I was craving sugar again. Like, I didn't have any fake sugar, but just that, like, brings something up in me where I'm like, oh, I really miss that. But then when I get rid of it and I'm not doing it and I'm just doing the eggs and the beef and the butter, I'm okay.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works. And a lot of people, like, I've seen people with, like, wearing continuous glucose monitors, and they'll go off the wagon once and they'll have, like, I don't know, a piece of cake or something like that. And you'll see what you'll see is a blood glucose will go up really high and come down. But for like a day or two after it, there's still these kind of vacillations, these little smaller ripple effects. It's like throwing a big rock in a pond and you see the waves that go for a while. There's little ripples that go out for a while and a while. And so I think you just disturb the system enough to where you take yourself out of that comfort zone. And sometimes it's easier. Like, I find that even with, like, because I don't eat very frequently, I eat a lot of food, but I don't eat, like, I only eat like twice a day. And I'll find that, like, I can not be hungry. And I could just, like, I'm not even going to eat because I don't feel like it. But the second I decide I'm going to eat something, and all the hunger comes back. It's like, ooh, now it's time to eat. And it's interesting how the body works in that way.
I've noticed that's really interesting because I used to be hungry all the time. So the joke was, if anyone wanted something to eat, they'd ask me. And I'm like, oh yeah, I carried around snacks. And just because I was already limited with my diet, but I would always have my plantain chips or my nuts. I always had nuts and seeds in a bag. I made my own granola. Like, I was constantly eating all the time. And that's one thing that I found very interesting. Like, if I have a solid meal and then I'm like, I don't think I'm hungry. So there are some days that I will eat too much, and then I have a hard time going to bed that night. And I'm like, why did I eat dinner? I only ate dinner because we were sitting down as a family and I wanted to eat something, but I ate way more. Like, I didn't need it.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think many people come to the conclusion of, is that they tend to eat a little bit less throughout the day. They have a couple meals instead of 4 or 5 times. Like, normally people are constantly snacking. They eat 3 meals a day and 3 snacks and a bedtime before they go to bed. And when they first get up, and it's like you're eating for a solid 16 hours every 2 hours or so. And then you go to 2 meals a day. And that's a natural progression for many people on carnivore. And then they start to feel like, I feel better when I eat earlier. And because the late meals tend to make it a little harder to sleep in some way. There's reasons for that. But that's what a lot of people discover, that I tend to do better when I have either no dinner or a smaller dinner relative to eating my larger meal. And like this morning, I had about 2 pounds of steak. That was my morning early. It was like 11 o'clock. So a brunch meal is my first meal of the day. And I'll probably have another steak for dinner, but a smaller one. And that'll be it. So I've doubled twice as many calories in the morning versus the evening. And that works pretty well for me.
I prefer that as well.
It's a pretty good way to do that. Do you find that you said you really enjoy ribeyes and things like that, and you're not really, like you said, you're not really calculating, just like, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. I don't care about the scale, but you generally can feel better. You said you're starting to put on a little more muscle, and that's got to feel good. Does it make you want to go back to do some of the athletic stuff you used to do?
Yeah. So I haven't done the athletic stuff because I know me. So after I had my ICU, after I went septic, I tried to exercise a few times after, and it was horrible. Like, it would take me like a week to recover because I don't know how to go halfway. I have to, whoever's running the fastest, I've got to keep up with. Like, I push myself way too far. And that's one of the things they say with EDS. They're like, okay, imagine a normal person mows the whole backyard. You should only mow a fourth of it. And then sit and rest and then and that's just not my personality. That's not me. But I feel like for the first time in a long time, I could go to the gym again. And I'm excited we're actually going to be moving to Austria for 6 months. And my husband started this challenge where they're doing 100 push-ups. And I was like, I'm going to see how many I can do. I did 25. Wow. Like, if you had asked me how many push-ups, I haven't done a push-up and I haven't done formal workout anything in at least 5 years because I honestly wasn't strong enough to do it. Like me going on walks was exhausting. So yeah, I'm excited to go skiing. They have great indoor pools and things. And I can't do pools here. Where we live, it's all chlorine and I react to it. But it'll be interesting. Maybe with Carnivore, I won't react anymore. But in Austria, it's a lot cleaner and more natural. And so I'm excited to swim laps. I'm excited to go skiing and running and hiking mountains. And yeah.
Interesting. And so 25 put like real push-ups or girl push-ups or what kind of were they real legit push-ups, huh?
They were real girl push-ups.
Okay. All right. So that's good.
But then I've done 20 normal push-ups. I've done 20 real push-ups. But my 16-year-old, my son just turned 16 and he's like 6 feet and he's working out all the time. And so he's like, were they real push-ups? I'm like, yeah, they're real push-ups. I was like, they were real. And then he left the room and Matt's like, Cameron, they were girl push-ups. I'm like, I don't care. They were real girl push-ups.
There you go. That's funny. Yeah. Austria. So do you speak German at all or? I'm sure a lot of the Austrians speak English. It's probably the case there. So you'll probably pick up some while you're over there. I'm sure. I was in Germany a couple months ago and I was actually born in Germany and I was a baby. My dad was in the Air Force and I was a baby when I left. So I don't remember it, but I did take a little German in high school. And so when I was in Germany, I remembered it started to come back a little bit so I could figure out some of the stuff, but it's interesting. So maybe you get to learn some of that while you're there. And maybe Carnivore will give you better linguistic powers, perhaps.
Maybe, because I've never been strong with language, but maybe I'll let you know. If Carnivore makes me fluent in another language,
that'd be another super.
I'll go selling it to everyone.
Another superpower. We are getting close to time on his camera. Is there anything else that we left out that you'd like to mention or anything else that you want to include or share where people can find you or something along those lines?
Sure. Yeah. I think just even if you've tried Carnivore, because here's the thing, I did try Carnivore for Lent. So I did Carnivore for 40 days and I didn't think it was worth the sacrifice, but I don't know why. I was still taking a lot of supplements. So I question if maybe it was the supplements. I don't know why. So I tried it out of pure desperation this past time. And I'm so glad I did because I feel like I have my life back and it is very sacrificial, but it's actually not that bad to be able to do all the things that I can do now. And I do feel like I feel like I've been given like 10 years back of my life. I felt like I was living like a grandma and now I'm living like a normal mom and I'm grateful for it. If anyone's interested in Among the Lilies, it's for ladies tired of pretending, ready to be real. It's on all the podcast apps. It's on YouTube. But it's all about just being just being ourselves and being okay with us and being the best us we can be. And doing Carnivore just makes sense with it because it's giving me the freedom to be the best me. And I'm grateful for it. So thank you so much, Dr. Baker, for just, all that you've done to make this available and spread the word. And I really appreciate all your hard work. And I enjoy your most recent interview on Rogan again. I really enjoyed. It was so good. And I just appreciate you speaking truth, even when I know the first interview, he thought you were crazy. Like, what the heck? This guy's a moron. Yeah,
it was a very different experience. The first time he looked at me like I had a third eyeball. And then the second time he was the one that was gushing about how good it was. It's interesting how things have changed over the last, it was 6 years between those two interviews. And so the world has changed quite a bit with regard to that. Cameron, thank you. I wish you continued success, not only in your health and your life and spreading the word that you're spreading around, and hopefully this will have an impact. I'm sure it will. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.